Our story begins with two emotionally confused teenagers, Hanabi and Mugi, who decide the best way to deal with unrequited love is dating each other. She's got a crush on her teacher, he's got a crush on his, and instead of moving on like regular sane teenagers, they pretend they love each other and call it a day. It's like trying to fix a flat tire with a band-aid. Hanabi, like the hopeless simp she is, absent-mindedly daydreams of Kanai-sensei alone in a classroom after school when she's interrupted by Kanai-sensei himself. They briefly admonish each other for being too casual with each other's name while on school grounds before they are interrupted by Minagawa-sensei. Upon her arrival, Hanabi immediately deflates with pure, unfiltered jealousy while Kanai-sensei beams. Hanabi silently excuses herself when Kanai-sensei abandons her like a pawn in chess in favor of talking with Minagawa-sensei. She walks into Mugi directly outside the classroom, who comments on her interestingly calm demeanor. The two retreat to a secluded place behind the outside of the school where they nonchalantly kiss each other in true hentai fashion. In a flashback, Hanabi's excitement about Kanai-sensei's recent announcement at her school as her homeroom teacher is quickly dashed once she observes him happily engaging with Minagawa-sensei, the new music teacher. Much to her disappointment, she soon realizes that Kanai-sensei has feelings for Minagawa-sensei. Later, at Hanabi's house, Kanai-sensei is eating dinner with Hanabi and her mother. Although Kanai-sensei is enjoying himself, Hanabi, whose heart is still in shambles because of the music lady, is certainly not. Despite Kanai-sensei complimenting the food, which Hanabi specifically helped make just for him, as Hanabi is walking Kanai-sensei home that night, she recalls a memory from when she was in elementary school. In the memory, it's field day at school, and since Hanabi doesn't have a father, Kanai-sensei is running the three-legged race with her, which frustrates her peers. Especially one pigtailed girl named Noriko. Hanabi retorts on the unfair nature of Noriko's running shoes, which draws enough attention away from Hanabi for her to escape. Kanai-sensei looks for her and finds her silently sitting alone in a shady spot behind the school. To cheer her up, they eat the lunch Hanabi's mother packed for them. As they're wrapping up their meal, they commiserate over the mutual nature of having but one parent and how they'll be able to be there for each other when they're lonely. Back in the present, Hanabi and Kanai-sensei have arrived at his house, parting ways, which brings Hanabi to tears. At school one day, Hanabi accidentally walks into Minagawa-sensei, falling to the floor and scattering several pieces of her sheet music. As she's seething over this unfortunate encounter with her arch-nemesis, Mugi steps in and picks up Minagawa-sensei's papers. Hanabi observes them interact and quickly recognizes a kindred spirit in hot and painful one-sided love, which sparks a relationship in which they act as comrades for one another, allowing them to mutually mope over their parallel circumstances together. Hanabi and Mugi's relationship progresses as they frequently spend time together. One day, while at Mugi's home after school, Hanabi suddenly embraces him, surprising Mugi. They simultaneously formulate a mutually beneficial idea to begin a friends with benefits relationship in which both of them can imagine the other as their subject of unrequited love, Kanai-sensei for Hanabi and Minagawa-sensei for Mugi. They experiment with this idea with Hanabi, who finds herself pleasantly surprised with the electricity of the fantasy. Mugi asks if she wants to cement this as a regular thing between them, but Hanabi doesn't answer yet. Behind the school, Hanabi harshly rejects a confession from a degenerate and pathetic-looking suitor, and afterwards ponders the new relationship she has with Mugi. She recalls returning to his place with her answer. The two made the experiment official by promising to break it off if either of them is successful with their love interest or if either of them falls in love with each other. The only thing the other can have is their body. They secured the agreement with a pinky promise and planned to tell people they're dating if anyone should ask. After school one day, Hanabi is approached by Ecchan, who proposes they walk home together, commenting on how it's been quite some time since they've done that. Mugi approaches the pair, prompting Ecchan to withdraw her idea so Hanabi can walk home with her boyfriend instead. As they leave, Ecchan watches on with a flat, spiritless expression. On the walk home, Mugi leans in to kiss Hanabi, but they are abruptly interrupted by Noriko. Noriko proceeds to narrate her relationship with Mugi like a deranged parrot on max volume. When playing together, adults would comment on how they resembled a prince and princess. This concept resonated with a young Noriko who internalized the desire to embody a princess. As Noriko is childishly clinging to Mugi's arm, Hanabi recognizes her as the same Noriko who gave her trouble over the three-legged race during the field day long ago. As it so happens, Noriko recognizes Hanabi from the same incident but naturally remembers her as the aggressor rather than as the girl she, herself, accused of cheating. Noriko voices her assumption that Hanabi secured Mugi through trickery and has been hiding her nasty personality all this time. Mugi agrees that Hanabi is, indeed, horrible. This comment resonates with Hanabi, who expresses her affection for Mugi before aggressively grabbing Noriko's collar and pulling her off his arm and close to her own face. She warns Noriko about getting too close to Mugi and puts the fear of God in her. Sometime later, Hanabi and Mugi are relaxing on the roof of the school again. Hanabi suggests that though Mugi cares for Noriko, he should properly turn her down. Mugi asks her if she's jealous, but she claims she's only possessive. They kiss, but Hanabi wonders if that's really the truth. Noriko, the unrelenting pest, invites herself to a lunch date between Mugi and Hanabi during school one day and gets indignant when Hanabi tries to share her food with Mugi. Hanabi stands up for herself, but Noriko attacks back, claiming that Hanabi is only using Mugi as a means to boost her popularity. When the nonplussed couple don't refute this claim, a flustered and irritated Noriko runs off past a passing-by Ecchan, who heard Noriko's claim. Sometime later, Hanabi is helping Kanai-sensei take large stacks of booklets to another room. They end up alone in the room, and a suddenly nervous Hanabi realizes now might be her chance to confess to him. Before she can initiate, they're interrupted by the sound of music coming from nearby. Minagawa-sensei is playing the piano in a music room next door. Entranced, Kanai-sensei softly mentions how good she is, which deflates Hanabi like a puncture balloon. Later, Hanabi and Mugi are at karaoke, where she is venting her frustration through singing. Mugi asks her if she's ever considered giving up and finding a different guy, but, irritated, Hanabi avoids answering. She instead offers the other mic to him to get him to sing with her. Before the song is over, Hanabi starts crying, which makes him take her in his arms and move her mind to Pleasureland. At school one day, some girls approach Hanabi and nervously ask her for romance advice. Later, on the roof, Mugi encourages her to go since she has so few female friends. He gets close to her face, and Hanabi wonders if he'll kiss her, but he only affectionately tussles her hair, which makes her feel like he's her boyfriend. Hanabi goes to a restaurant with the girls, who explain that one of them is simultaneously in 2 relationships with 2 different guys and is having a hard time deciding who to commit to. Hanabi asks her who she likes, but since the girl says she has no particularly strong feelings for either of them, and that the discomfort is coming from the prospect of choosing and not her feelings for them conflicting, Hanabi feels she cannot empathize. The girl's friend suggests she choose the one who can offer her more of an advantage, an answer that shocks innocent little Hanabi to her bones. Sometime later, Hanabi sits with Ecchan at school and talks with her about why one chooses the one they love. Ecchan responds that, in her case, the idea of gaining an advantage or getting something out of it was not a concern of hers. Hanabi hugs her for her good advice and asks if she likes anyone. She then invites her for a sleepover. Later that evening, Ecchan arrives at Hanabi's apartment. She narrates her excitement for the evening ahead, but then asks herself why she screwed things up. On a train, Ecchan suddenly begins to be molested from behind by an unknown man. She's too stunned to do anything. Hanabi, who happens to be standing right by Ecchan, notices what's happening and quietly asks Ecchan if he's bothering her. Silently, with tears beginning to well in her eyes, Ecchan shows her the exam paperwork in her bag, which Hanabi is actually attending as well. Hanabi retrieves her phone, sticks it in the man's face, and takes a picture so he can see himself in the camera. The faceless, pathetic pervert walks away in shame. Hanabi takes Ecchan's hand in hers. Once they've gotten off the train car and onto the platform, she confronts Ecchan and encourages her to let herself cry, remarking on the scariness of such an encounter. Ecchan meekly agrees as her tears finally fall down her face. The two walk together to the exam venue without Hanabi ever letting go of Ecchan's hand. While in Hanabi's apartment for their sleepover, Ecchan narrates that was the moment she fell in love with Hanabi. Later, Hanabi recounts the discussion she had with the 2 girls who wanted romantic advice, explaining how their warped perspective will make them end up alone, an outcome that dampens Hanabi's mood. Ecchan quickly suggests they retire for the night. The girls are sharing Hanabi's bed, but due to its small size, they're lying extremely close to one another, which has Ecchan red and tingly all over. Around 2 in the morning, Ecchan shifts to her side, facing Hanabi, who is also on her side. Ecchan is watching her sleep for a moment before Hanabi suddenly opens her eyes and catches Ecchan staring at her. Hanabi quietly asks her what her crush is like, a question that catches Ecchan off guard. She contemplates for a moment before suddenly kissing her. Hanabi, wide-eyed and muffled, gasps in surprise. Ecchan rolls herself on top of her and holds herself above Hanabi, breathing heavily. Hanabi looks up at her, confused and flustered, with wide eyes. Ecchan asks Hanabi why she's with Mugi when she doesn't truly like him, stating that she can tell that it's the truth from having watched her interact with Mugi with an empty and loveless expression. Hanabi, stunned at having been found out, quietly reveals the truth of her relationship with him. Hanabi remembers when she turned down a guy that asked her out, and she thinks back to the night before, after Ecchan had confessed, pondering how emotionally heavy it is to be the object of someone's affection. As she's thinking, she runs into pain in the behind Noriko, who's walking from the opposite direction. Noriko confronts her adversary and tries to instigate, but is utterly ignored by Hanabi. Later in her walk, Hanabi considers the self-destructive perspective of the girl she tried to advise before, and how if she cannot choose either of her suitors, she ends up with neither. In a flashback, Mugi's friends are discussing the upper-class girls at their school, specifically Mei, who they remark is particularly alluring to their one-celled, lustful brains. They note her skinny figure and large melons. An inexperienced Mugi to fit in agrees robotically, but it's evident he hasn't been paying attention to what the other boys have been, including Mei. Mei, for some reason, takes a particular interest in Mugi. At some point later, they're in bed together, but Mugi, being an innocent virgin at the time, is stiff and uneasy. Mugi suddenly wakes up. This flashback turned out to be a dream he was having, which caused his cannon to stand at attention. He looks over and discovers that, having let herself in, Hanabi is standing in his room. Embarrassed, he quickly covers himself with his covers. To his shock, Hanabi crawls into bed with him and snuggles up to him. He tries to prevent it, but she notices his cannon. He gauges her reaction and tells her to touch it. In a flashback, Mei informs Mugi she won't be attending high school anymore. Mugi starts to cry like a baby, but Mei reminds him he loves Minagawa-sensei. Mugi abruptly stops Hanabi before she can touch him. He calls off the suggestion without meeting her eyes. When asked why, he tells her he wouldn't be able to stop himself. Hanabi tells him not to, an answer that surprises him. Mugi allows her to touch him, but due to her inexperience, she's hopeless and doesn't know what to do, but he guides her. Later, she notices how cute it is that he feels good. Afterwards, she wonders why the thought of touching Ecchan that night of their sleepover was so formidable, yet touching Mugi was surprisingly easy for her. She decides it must be because of her comfort around him, which she informs him of. He absent-mindedly asks her why. She playfully teases him before suddenly going quiet and beginning to cry. A shocked Mugi finally sits up and pays attention to her. Hanabi tells him she wants to try to love him. Mugi and Hanabi have dinner in a restaurant. She lightly scolds him when she suddenly notices over Mugi's shoulder Minagawa-sensei walking through the restaurant with another dude. Mugi, seeing Hanabi's unhappy face, turns and sees Minagawa-sensei and the man. The two couples awkwardly, silently do nothing for a moment. The man breaks the silence and inquires as to how Minagawa-sensei knows Hanabi and Mugi. She tells him they're her students from the school she works at. Minagawa-sensei tries to get the man to leave her side, but he takes her waist in his hand and kisses her neck. An uncomfortable Minagawa-sensei tries to stop this atrocious and inappropriate behavior that's being displayed in front of her students. The man takes her wrist and pulls her along. As she's being pulled away, Minagawa-sensei apologizes and gives Hanabi a sly look. She suggests they keep each other's activities secret. Later, Hanabi watches Minagawa-sensei and Kanai-sensei walk together from a window above them with a look of utter disgust, noting her distaste for Minagawa-sensei. Mugi approaches her, sees the pair walking on the school grounds below them, and confesses, to Hanabi's shock, that he knew the man Minagawa-sensei was with the night before. With a sadly naive smile, he remarks to Hanabi that they must have been doing such work together when the two couples ran into each other at the restaurant. Hanabi wordlessly walks away from him in frustration. As she leaves him at the window with a confused look on his face, she remarks how love can make you blind. As she walks, she begins to feel hatred for Minagawa-sensei. Hanabi approaches Minagawa-sensei and asks her if the man she was with at the restaurant was her boyfriend. Minagawa-sensei appears slightly shocked that Hanabi would confront her so directly, but she smiles and denies the assumption, claiming he's just a friend. Puzzled, Hanabi silently wonders why Minagawa-sensei would ask that she keep the interaction a secret if the man wasn't a former student of hers. She then considers Kanai-sensei and how he plays into this situation. Minagawa-sensei breaks the silence by sweetly asking Hanabi if something is the matter. Before Hanabi can answer, the school bell rings, and Minagawa-sensei quickly suggests the two continue their conversation after school before running off. As the teacher dashes away, Hanabi notices that she's wearing the same outfit from yesterday. Unseen to Hanabi, Minagawa-sensei smirks in true villain fashion. While riding a fairly empty train, two men decide to occupy the seats flanking Minagawa-sensei. She thinks that being wanted by men is the best feeling in the world. Minagawa-sensei recalls a memory from when she was a teenage student. In the memory, she is approached by a boy named Saito, who, she explains, is one of her female friend's crushes. Out of the corner of her eye, Minagawa spots the friend who likes Saito watching the interaction of him returning Minagawa's dropped handkerchief to her while in the shadows of a nearby corridor. However, Saito doesn't notice her. Minagawa-sensei thinks that maybe she was interested in the attention Saito was receiving. Minagawa decides to accidentally touch Saito's hand when retrieving the handkerchief, an action that surprises him and prompts him to move a little closer to Minagawa. The friend, still believing herself unseen, silently excuses herself. Soon after, Minagawa finds her friend down by the water's edge of a pond, where she, heartbroken, bawling her eyes out like the end of the world has come, Minagawa-sensei narrates. She thinks that I would rather die than find herself exploited like Saito. Minagawa-sensei is in bed with the man Hanabi and Mugi saw her with at the restaurant earlier. Minagawa-sensei asks him what happened to the girl he was dating. Terauchi tells her they quit seeing each other a long time ago, which causes her indifference to him to immediately become pure disinterest. Not even acknowledging Terauchi, fondling her melons like they're federal property and kissing her neck. Later, while walking with Kanai-sensei outside, Minagawa-sensei notices Hanabi watching them from an open window. She smirks, and thinks to herself that Hanabi must really love him. Shortly thereafter, Kanai-sensei asks her if she'd like to spend time with him outside of work, perhaps at a cafe. At that moment, Minagawa-sensei again notices Hanabi nearby, watching them, and therefore decides to reject Kanai-sensei's proposal in favor of them spending time together on campus after work that day. She recalls her interest in Hanabi seeing her being popular with the boys around school, seeing Noriko sadly watch her and Mugi huddled together under an umbrella after school one rainy day, and especially when seeing how differently she behaved around Kanai-sensei. Minagawa-sensei reveals that her interaction with Kanai-sensei after seeing how Hanabi liked him was the moment she had decided to start leading him on, despite not being romantically interested in him, explicitly for the purpose of hurting Hanabi. When Hanabi had quickly excused herself from the classroom, Minagawa-sensei narrates that she was disappointed, stating that she had wanted to see the hurt expression on her face. When sweetly asking Hanabi if something was the matter, Minagawa-sensei thinks how she desperately wanted to see pain in Hanabi's face in that moment. As she runs off once the bell interrupts them, she reiterates her excitement at seeing Hanabi's devastation after school, knowing that she'll get a front-row seat to Minagawa-sensei's meeting with Kanai-sensei. In a flashback, while walking alone one day, Kanai-sensei saw Minagawa-sensei and was astonished at how much her hair reminded him of his late mother. The two made eye contact, and Kanai-sensei narrates that it was love at first sight. She sweetly suggested that they should look out for one another, seeing as how they're both new teachers. In another memory, she remarks about the summer heat before asking Kanai-sensei what it is as he wanted to discuss. A very nervous and flushed Kanai-sensei eyes a bead of sweat that rolls down her neck to her exposed collarbone before mustering the courage to confess his love for her. In accordance with Minagawa-sensei's plan, Hanabi happened to be standing in the doorway of the music room as he said this. Hanabi runs off and takes refuge in another empty classroom, sitting on the floor and hugging her knees, breathing heavily. She wonders why the tears she expected to flow weren't coming. She attributes their absence to the lack of rights she has over Kanai-sensei, pointing out she never did anything about her feelings for him. She wonders if the two will begin dating, immediately hoping that they don't. She wonders why, in all the time she's known Kanai-sensei, she hadn't ever confessed. She wonders if her hesitation might have been due to her fear that they'd have stopped being so close if she had. While walking from Mugi's place, after almost telling him what she feels about his precious big melon teacher, Ecchan suddenly approaches Hanabi, surprising her. She asks Ecchan if she had been following her. Embarrassed, Ecchan confirms, voicing her concern that Hanabi is upset with her. Hanabi stares at her, frozen, wondering why Ecchan likes her so much. Overcome by emotion, Hanabi rushes forward and wraps her arms around Ecchan. Both girls are crying. Mid-hug, Hanabi apologizes for the intimacy and how it might be making their situation worse, who calmly dismisses this and resolutely assures her that it's okay. Ecchan then pulls back a bit and kisses Hanabi, who thinks to herself that although she is aware that doing this isn't okay, she isn't stopping it. Ecchan is straddling Hanabi, gazing down at her as she lies in her bed. Ecchan narrates that the rain that had suddenly come that night hadn't shown any signs of its arrival until it had begun falling. She interlaces her fingers with Hanabi's and grips her hand, which doesn't grip back. Ecchan asks her if she's nervous, and Hanabi quietly tells her she is, but only because Ecchan is her friend. Hanabi then closes her eyes and tries to turn her head away, but Ecchan descends upon her and kisses her passionately. She then asks Hanabi if this is what one does with their friends, pointing out that she does these things with Mugi. Upon hearing this, Hanabi's eyes start to water. Seeing this, Ecchan withdraws, looking ashamed and worried. Looking away, she tells Hanabi she's free to stop this if she would like, but Hanabi, struggling to maintain her composure, informs her she won't do that because she cares about Ecchan. Ecchan simply stares down at Hanabi, contemplating. She narrates that she's aware of what Hanabi is doing, putting aside what she wants in order for Ecchan to have what she desires, because she fears if she doesn't, she'll lose Ecchan altogether. Ecchan decides that if Hanabi is okay with being taken advantage of, then, to satisfy her own desires, she will do so. She starts to be intimate with Hanabi. To cope with her obvious woman-to-woman discomfort, Hanabi tries to imagine a frequently imagined scenario wherein she confesses her love to Kanai-sensei, who doesn't reject her. However, the fantasy isn't working. Ecchan tries to force Hanabi to be present with her and tells Hanabi to tell her what it is she wants her to do to her. Flustered, Hanabi refuses. Applying a different tactic, Ecchan fingers Hanabi under the covers and asks her again if she'd like her to stop, but Hanabi doesn't respond. Ecchan assumes aloud that perhaps Hanabi is just weak to pleasure in general, but Hanabi interjects obstinately and tells her that when Ecchan specifically touches her, it feels good. Ecchan then takes Hanabi into her arms, cradling her head to her soft, melon-encased chest. She tells a crying, startled Hanabi that it feels good because she loves her so much, and that the love can be felt through her touch. Hanabi confronts Minagawa-sensei in an empty classroom, who playfully asks her if she's mad about Mugi or Kanai-sensei. Hanabi bitterly wonders if this means that she knew about Mugi's love for her all along. Smirking, Minagawa-sensei correctly guesses that since he can't have her, that he's filling the void with an accessible classmate. Exasperated, Hanabi loudly asks her if it's really that fun to be loved by people you don't even like. This question excites the crazy nutjob teacher Minagawa-sensei, who lets her blouse drop past her shoulders, exposing her bra straps and some of her wonderfully crafted melons. Her face flushed and sensual, she asks Hanabi what could feel better than being desired by men. Hanabi watches in horror as the teacher licks her lips like an animal, like a hungry predator. Thanks for joining us on another adventure, my fellow weebs. If you enjoyed this episode of Weebtoons, make sure to smash that like button and leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel.